Good morning and welcome to Namaste today, a delightful way to begin your weekday. I'm your heartfelt host and the Sensei to Serious Joy, Christopher Witecki. Happy Hump Day and Namaste. Well, my friend and earthly neighbor, today will be a cloudy and introverted day. Spirit rules the day, and considering we've been in the rough aggression of Aries, it's a nice and needed break. In your zodiac weather, I'll talk about the planets and how they're helping you align with your higher self. And later in your tea time, resistance is futile. The sun is starting to conjunct Uranus, and I'll be talking about how you may be resisting the change. But first, let's take a look at today's moods and your zodiac weather. This zodiac weather is for Wednesday, April 5th, 2017. And my global forecast for planet Earth is cloudy and spiritual today. Step 16 rules the day, calling us into our spirit, and the moon moves into Leo, calling us into our heart. Let's take a look at the planets. Well, the last 2 days have been a little bumpy in my opinion, both from the sun in Aries being aggressive and the moon being in Cancer, being very moody and emotional. Things will cloud up and kind of smooth over today. Step 16 rules the day. 16 adds to a 7, which means your higher self is attempting to connect and open up. And it really all depends on that 6, whether or not you open up to receive from your higher self. But today, tension begins for personal transformation. Up until now, we've been working on an ego that is functional. So we were removing parts of our ego that was dysfunctional, the parts of us that acted out, the behavior that we weren't proud of. Then we moved to becoming more functional and just keeping things from going wrong, even though the moon was in Cancer and things were kind of moody. But now we're beginning to look at the high potential of our ego. We're beginning to make a decision as to whether we want to try to be not just okay, but great. And as of today, the sun begins to conjunct Uranus. In fact, today they're at a 7-degree orb. That tells me that our senses, our spirit, is going to tell us, if we listen, what it's going to take to make this major revolution inside of us. Now, Uranus is at step 23. So Uranus is attempting to get us to get the big picture and get the aha moment, the understanding of who it is we're trying to become. So in a way, we're sort of searching for the label. But Uranus is fixing to switch to step 24 any second now, and as soon as it does, you'll be called to rise up to that level, not just identify it. So today I think it's a spiritual day meant to sort of identify where it is that you are going. And with the sun conjuncting Uranus, you might feel a little uneasy. You might feel like there's an earthquake coming or something is not right. And what that is your very foundation is going to innovate in the next 5-6 days, and you are feeling that this shift is happening. Now, the moon today is in Leo, and thank goddess it went through the early degrees of Leo while we were sleeping here in the United States. Europe and Asia had to deal with it during the day. That means our inner child and the pouty side of ourselves kind of worked ourselves out in our sleep. And as we begin today, we'll move into the second decan, which means our heart will be exploring. And what do you think your heart is exploring? Your heart is exploring what it can open up to, particularly what it can open up to in terms of your character, what you can open up to in terms of the next action to take, what you can open up to as far as the big picture of who you really are. And as the moon climbs up the degrees, it will begin to trine more and more and more with the sun, which means as the day progresses, your heart will become more and more clear about who you are and who you want to become next. Now, this question of who you are and who you want to become next is not just a practical ego-based question, it's a very profound spiritual one. I believe that at this point, human beings are reaching for the story they were born to live. I believe that because Saturn is conjuncting the galactic center and stationary at step 27. Saturn is digging in its heels so that we understand why it is we came here in the first place. One of the hard problems that we have is our ego gets running on Earth and disconnects from our soul and often gets a little lost. And this is one of those moments where we're trying to find our way and connect to our God Positioning Service, GPS. Well, Saturn on the galactic center is pushing for you to understand what means the most to your soul. And at the same time, Venus has retrograded, meaning we're opening up to the past and we're opening up to subconscious energies. Venus has retrograded back to Pisces now and is conjuncting Chiron, a comet asteroid based on healing. So what this boils down to is, as you are searching for who you really are, you're also at the same time searching for your soul's purpose, and you are opening up to healing what your soul feels its potential is. That's what Chiron is doing up there, is healing your potential. So in some circumstances, you may feel called to greatness, but your soul may be reluctant to do so. And that reluctance is not because you won't succeed. It's because your soul has failed in the past, and you're literally giving yourself a deep spiritual second chance to do so. So as you can tell, this is a lot of spiritual processing for people today on the planet, and some people might be a little cranky. Now, Mercury's at step 3 Taurus, which means our minds today are opening up to new ideas. And Mercury will hit step 4 before bedtime, which means I can almost guarantee some sort of aha moment or breakthrough by tonight. Mars is at step 18 and shifting to step 19 today, and that means despite all this confusion with who you are and where you're going and where you're growing, you should stay on track with business as usual. You are manifesting forward, you are trailblazing, and the things you are creating do count. They will manifest in the future. But you may find as you try to move through the day that you're encountering a ton of resistance. And this brings up my tea time topic, folks. So go steep yourself some tea, and let's have our daily tea time. Hello, my friend, and welcome to our tea time. Today's tea time topic is resistance is futile. And I actually borrowed that phrase like a geek from Star Trek, of course, but it really does ring true. Resistance is futile when it comes to yourself. Now, what I'm speaking to is the Sun conjuncting Uranus. One thing I've learned as an astrologer over the years is that Uranus in your chart, wherever it falls natally in your chart, is the place that you resist most. You actually spend most of your life resisting that part of your consciousness. Literally resisting the change. That's why Uranus can be so explosive, because by the time a planet hits Uranus, most people have resisted and held out so long that there's tremendous energy that has to be released. And right now, the Sun is beginning to conjunct Uranus. In simple terms, this means that the universe is pushing for you to let go of your resistance and go with the story you were meant to live. Now here's the hard part. Uranus in Aries is in a spot of our consciousness that resists the most. Our ego, step 9 or Aries, is the part of us that is designed to resist failing, resist death, resist everything, including God. And so we're asking the part of ourselves that doesn't resist to resist resisting. It's very difficult. Today, step 16 rules the day, and so today my formula always is, it's time to find the path of least resistance. Now the reason for that is, it's been my observation as a sensei to serious joy, that when the spiritual path comes, when God, universe, or the angels, or whatever answer your prayers, it's always, always the path of least resistance. What I mean by that is, it's always so easy to do, it is nearly effortless. Now today, because your ego is holding on to certain old sides of yourself, maybe your ego is holding on to old fears, maybe your ego is holding on to control issues. I mean, the ego wants to be in power, period. But whatever it's holding on to, it may be resisting the easy way. And you may be resisting the easy way for the wrong reasons. You may be resisting it because it will mean that you have failed at something. You may resist it because you're afraid you can't be strong enough for that path. You may resist it because you're afraid that other people will see you as weak. These are all ego-based issues. So today with this speculation, It's time to get to the bottom of the parts of you that are resisting. A simple technique that I always say to my clients is when you find yourself stuck in a certain situation, use that power of your imagination to kind of imagine certain scenarios. So imagine if you went with this direction. Imagine if you went with that direction. And when you imagine these different directions, notice and observe inside yourself the parts of you that argue and scream. Notice the parts of you that bring up examples to hold you back. And any part that you're resisting heavily, you might want to draw a circle around that. Because in this particular transit, with the type of change we're about to make, it's highly likely that the best path for you right now is the one you're resisting most. So another way to look at this is the right path or direction for you may actually be a breeze to do, something that would be effortless and easy for you to execute, but a whole side of you will get up in arms and upset about going down that path, even though it makes logical sense and perhaps your spirit is pointing you in that direction. Now, if that's the case, if your ego is throwing a fit to the correct path, the path that your soul feels like it's meant to go down, then at that point, you're having to deal directly with your ego and your ego's resistance. And here is how Sensei deals with his ego and his ego's resistance. The truth is, the ego just wants to win. It doesn't really care about what it wins. So when my ego realizes that it was wrong and that it's going to have to go down a certain path that it resists and doesn't want to go down, like a little doggy, I kind of have to talk my ego into going along with the path. And so what I have to understand inside myself is how this situation is going to be perhaps the loss of a battle, but winning the war. When you can see the big picture that your ego is going to have to take one for the team in order to get everything you want, it is much easier for you to no longer resist. You can let go of that resistance, and the reason is because your ego can quickly jump ahead to being king or queen of the new mountain. And this is a sophisticated, way of dealing with ourselves. I mean, I think human beings, their hardest trait is facing this ego. The ego is a part of us that gets over the hardest battles, that becomes strong over time. And when you tell the ego, hey, I know you're strong, but I want you to give up this fight because this other path is a better path of least resistance, the ego doesn't want to give up everything it's earned in its whole title. So you have to somehow convince the dumbass that it's going to have what it wants in the long run. And this is a complicated and quiet conversation with yourself. Now, one last piece of advice today, if you find yourself facing these sort of resistances in yourself, and that's the moon. Remember, the king or queen of your soul is your heart. And if your ego is out of line, today the moon in Leo will help your heart express its opinion. In other words, does your heart want the path of least resistance, or does your heart want to resist? If you have a hard time kind of putting down the ego for the right and righteous path, bring your heart into the conversation and refer to yesterday's episode, The Heartfelt Voice. All right, my friend, good luck resisting the resistance. Remember, resistance is futile. Until tomorrow, remember I love you and live, love, be.
Live, love, be.